In one of my recent videos, which I highly recommend you to check out, we're pros at self-promotion here, I talked about the latest Rurouni Kenshin live-action movie and I went through point by point what didn't really work for me. And if you remember, I briefly mentioned the second live-action film, Rurouni Kenshin Kyoto Inferno, which adapts the first part of the iconic Kyoto arc. Also, I'm still waiting for that season 3 of the remake. It's been almost a year. Please, little films. I rewatched this movie recently and it was exceptional and I'm going to talk about it, so let's go. Unlike the last live action, which focuses more on Kenshin's past, this one is a direct continuation of the first movie. I'm not really going to talk about that one because I think it's pretty average. It has some great action scenes, but overall it's a bit forgettable and the emotional side is kind of missing, which is unfortunate. Obviously, there will be some light spoilers, but nothing too serious. You'll still absolutely be able to enjoy the movie afterward. My goal here is actually to make you want to watch it because I think it's a great experience that you shouldn't miss. That being said, I do think that unlike the last film, this one might be harder to fully appreciate if you're not already in love with the manga and or the anime, which is obviously my case. So, shall we get into it? I'm not going to spend much time explaining what Rurouni Kenshin is about. I assume that if you're here listening to me, you're probably already familiar with it. But just in case, it's the story of a former assassin who helped bring about the Meiji era and who 10 years later chooses to stop killing. He settled at the Kamiya dojo, run by Kaoru Kamiya, a young woman who welcomes him with open arms and sees the good in him. And of course, many other characters join the story along the way. So the film will follow Kenshin as he struggles between the promise he made to Kaoru and his duty to save Japan from the clutches of Makoto Shishio, who's plotting to take over the country and leaving a trail of massacres behind him. It's packed with action, intense emotional moments, and even some lighter, funny scenes. So it's a wonderful adaptation that, in my opinion, even manages to fill in some gaps from the manga, and I'm going to explain why. First of all, this movie makes the decision to skip quite a few smaller arcs from the original story. I'm thinking about the Raijuta arc, for example, or the mini arc centered on Yahiko or Sanosuke and their personal struggles. At first, that's actually a bit of a shame, and I didn't really understand why they made that choice, because those moments are what really strengthened our bond with the characters. We grew attached to them, and more importantly, we get to see Kaoru spend time with Kenshin, which is one of the most crucial aspects of the story and something the first movie unfortunately brushed aside. But here, I think the film manages to make up for it pretty well. Kenshin clearly seems more attached to Kaoru, and without spoiling too much about the ending of the movie, she's pretty much the center of the ending, which I absolutely love. Give my beautiful princess the appreciation she deserves. I love her. Now let's talk about one of my favorite scenes in not only the movie, not only Rurouni Kenshin, but in all of Japanese animation, maybe even my favorite, the famous farewell scene between Kenshin and Kaoru. In the manga, the scene is pretty good. I think it stays with you because it's a pivotal moment in the manga, but it's nothing that will blow your mind, I think. But in the original 1996 anime adaptation, though, oh my lord, it's a masterpiece of staging. I've never seen that in my entire life. Like, breathtaking colors, incredible lighting, and direction that honestly has nothing to envy from modern productions. And on top of that, the music, the music is absolutely magnificent. Just look at this. In this film, there are no fireflies, and sure, a part of me would love that, but that's mostly my own bias speaking. A live-action adaptation should always bring something new to the table, so here the scene happens in broad daylight and it's much shorter. And it works because the audience is presumably less invested in their relationship at that point, so stretching out their goodbye wouldn't really serve much purpose. It's a clear, deliberate choice, and it's an effective one. And more importantly, the dialogue is kind of reworked. Kaoru feels more confident, less paralyzed by fear, and Kenshin comes across as more cynical. The past sticks to us. It's one of my favorite lines from this movie. And from the very first film, this live-action saga already stood out because of the adaptive changes it made. The core of the story remains the same, but the writing intentions are amplified and the order of events is rearranged to fit an 1 hour and 45-minute format, which means that no matter what kind of viewer you are, whether you are a long-time fan or just someone curious with no prior knowledge, you can still have a great time and be genuinely surprised. So in a way, everyone is kind of put on the same level. And that's exactly why the Rurouni Kenshin in the beginning ends up being, I think, disappointing, because it adapts one of the best arcs in the manga, and yet the film feels kind of flat. It's faithful, yes, but still pretty flat, because it's way too faithful. I want some changes because it's a live action. I also feel like Kaoru's character is really elevated throughout the film. She was almost completely sidelined in the first one, which honestly felt like an insult to me, because without Kaoru, the story loses its very essence. But anyway, everyone who watched or read Rurouni Kenshin has to admit that to some point. Here she gets way more characterization. She's given much more assertive action scenes than in the manga. Her ideals are clearly expressed and her connection with Kenshin is highlighted much more. It took the filmmakers an entire movie to realize that they had ripped out the heart of the story, but hey, better late than never. I love the scene where Kaoru joins him to Kyoto and asks if he's angry with her. And by the way, sweetheart, you have absolutely nothing to apologize for. It's this motherfucker that needs to apologize, but anyway. Normally, Kenshin answers pretty bluntly that he's conflicted, he's angry with her, but also relieved to see her, but doesn't really elaborate, and he just walks ahead, which honestly works pretty well. But here they add one single line that made me scream the first time I heard it. He says, "I'd rather have you close to me." Hello? Since when are you this romantic? Oh boy. And I mean this as a compliment. It adds so much tenderness and a sweet moment to a scene that I already really loved in the OG version. I really appreciate that addition, even though it probably went completely unnoticed for, I'd say, most viewers. As for the fights, they're still just as intense, but what I find interesting is that they actually take up less space in the film, unlike the first movie where fights were basically being thrown around like flour and eggs in a foot fight. They're still badass and beautifully choreographed here, but I noticed that there's a real less exaggerated action scenes, and it's more philosophical. The blows and movements aren't exaggerated, like I said, everything feels more refined. A good example is the Sojiro versus Kenshin fight, which was already one of my favorites to begin with, even though technically this only lasts about 15 seconds in the OG. Here it's slightly extended, but it's entirely to its benefit. And honestly, I might even prefer this version. Overall, I really don't have much to complain about. The film prioritizes tension over pure action, and I think that's a very smart choice that aligns much better with the spirit of the manga. The events unfold more slowly here, which makes everything much easier to digest compared to the first film, which quickly falls in over-the-top spectacle. You can really feel that the script writing is much more thoughtful this time around. As for the characters, I do regret that Sano and Yahiko have such limited screen time, but on the other hand, Misao and Megumi absolutely shines. Her arc was adapted really well. I'm talking about Misao, from her introduction to her interactions with Kaoru and Yahiko. And what surprised me the most is that the film actually adapts almost the entirety of her storyline without simply copying the source material. And honestly, that's quite impressive. And as for the ending, personally, I'm completely on board with it. Okay, things get a little wild. I'll admit the scene in the ocean was a bit much, but it's also a brilliant way to keep you on the edge and also immediately make you want to see the sequel. And yes, the order of the events has clearly been completely rearranged. I haven't seen the third film yet, so I can't really judge the full payoff because I'm actually waiting to watch the third season of the remake, but I'm hopeful and honestly really excited to see the continuation. Okay, so don't get me wrong, this isn't the film of the decade. It still has flaws, especially when it comes to emotional impact, which remains somewhat limited compared to the experience that I had when I read the manga. But it's still exceptionally well executed from start to finish. It fixes many of the mistakes made by the first film, so hopefully we're heading in the right direction for the next one. Anyway, I hope that my rambling didn't bore you too much. Don't forget to like and subscribe as always, and I'll see you next time.